This man is suffering from schizophrenia and has decided to show his hallucinations through his videos. This man's name is Christopher Grant, and he has been suffering from schizophrenia throughout his life. On his social media, he posts videos showing how a person with this illness sees the world. For example, in this shot, you can see him lying in his bed, hearing different voices, noticing the faces of strange beings while the surrounding world starts to blur and distort. In these shots, he is walking through the forest, and silhouettes of strange beings appear before him while a face manifests on a tree. Just listen to these voices in his head. This girl is also suffering from schizophrenia, and through her drawings, she has decided to show her version of how she perceives the world. During her hallucinations, she hears different voices, noises, sees strange beings, and much more. According to her, this bird comes to her window and sings a melody that she has never heard before. And this creature is constantly watching her, no matter where she is. The illusions are so realistic that they literally can't tell the real fire from the fake one. They have to touch their skin to check if it's burned to make sure whether it's an illusion or reality. What if people with schizophrenia are actually healthy and see things that we don't notice? What if we live in a matrix with limitations? It's such an interesting feeling. When I tune in through the higher self to a person with schizophrenia, it feels like they live in their own little universe, they have their own world, and sometimes their mind, their consciousness feels very comfortable in that world. You know, psychotherapists say for a reason that sometimes a person doesn't need to be convinced otherwise because they feel so good there. He doesn't want to go in there.
Is this a distortion? It's a distortion of the mind.
It's 50-50.
Or maybe it's the opposite, a greater connection with the spirit, an awakening of abilities, and the person just can't process it.
Listen, well, first of all, I can clearly see that there's a strong extrasensory trace there. That's really interesting. I used to think, to be honest, that it was just pure hallucinations.
Seriously?
Wow. Exactly. Well, from the current personality, from a higher perspective, what interests me is that there are still many topics that I see there in a completely different way. There's a clear extrasensory trace there.
Explain for our viewers what you mean by that.
I mean that there are indeed people with these so-called hallucinations, and they really do actually see certain layers. That's true.
What actually exists?
What actually exists, yes. But I have this feeling that it's improperly revealed extrasensory perception.
That's right.
It's as if this extrasensory perception is revealed either through some intense stress or something else. So basically, they really start to see, but through a distortion of their mind, which has been somewhat twisted, so to speak, by this sudden awakening. So it turns out there's a kind of mix there, both extrasensory perception and a distortion of the mind that just can't process what it's seeing. Well, I hadn't seen this before, but it's really interesting. You said this phrase that, yes, you studied this.
No, it's just that from time to time. But you always tell me that I have a very good intuitive connection with the spirit. And I have never looked at this topic through the higher self in my entire life. But just when you came in to ask me what I think about it, I gave exactly that answer, because for me it's just obvious. It's obvious. Yes, what this is. Well, people are discovering their abilities. And for me, it looks like there's a prism. Light is coming through, just like they draw it. The light is coming through, and here's our so-called mind, this barrier, right? And it passes through it, and what's all twisted in a person, as you said, the light goes through that twisted part, and what gets unpacked here is exactly what they see. And each person has their own version of it, and it... So there, as you say, extrasensory perception, that is what actually exists, is mixed with blocks in the mind, which the person is afraid of. And accordingly, pure purity takes on a frightening form, for example. And this person doesn't accept it. And so, just what exists as a given gets layered with some distorted images because the person doesn't accept it, and so on. And it really is like a ball of confusion, like yes and no. So he's both right and wrong. Well, that's really interesting. I'm really curious to ask you, what should people do about this? So there are a lot of people like that, and lately, even in my field, I've been coming across those who don't understand what is happening to them. And of course, these people often don't want to go anywhere for treatment.
Their minds are blocked, closed off from being able to work with this. Many of them. because they really, due to the fact that it distorts them a bit, they lose contact with rationality.
With reality, yes.
They lose touch with reality. And the fact that this guy is actually making videos about how he sees things is really a huge plus for him.
Yes, yes.
He understands that this is a problem and so on.
He's trying to bring in, or at least explain, how to combine two realities, his own with the common one, so to speak.
I'll put it this way. There are medications that suppress certain parts of the brain, basically all sorts of antipsychotics, so-called. I've seen guys dealing with this issue. They really work. Their hallucinations disappear. Everything disappears. I see this at the core of schizophrenia as if, again, I'm not a psychotherapist. You know what it resembles? Like the mirror that was broken. So it's some kind of fracture, some kind of psychological trauma. For some reason, I always have this feeling of some kind of fracture, a break, something along those lines. And they need to stabilize their system first. Well, that is, it might really help to dampen things a bit with these antipsychotics for a while. They need to work with a psychotherapist, an experienced professional one, a real psychotherapist, not a charlatan, who can help them address this fracture and heal it.
To heal these wounds, yes.
To heal that wound, and then, if they're interested in the topic of extrasensory perception, gently, without rushing, they might return to it under the supervision, ideally, of a psychotherapist. So, because their, let's say, etheric astral plane has fractured their psyche, they simply had a predisposition to this, right? On a psychological level, that they would have such a fracture, or their spirit decided to go through this very experience. That's a whole different topic. I think everyone has their own reasons, right? And you know what? What do I see? I see that these people, they can actually become good psychics because they are very sensitive individuals. Of course, but they need a very special approach, and it must be under the supervision of psychotherapists. Definitely a slow process, taking their time, as they say, with breaking down what they see, how to see correctly, and how not to see. Ideally, if our society were more esoteric and inclusive, if it were perhaps more accepting, there would be psychotherapeutic programs for such people. Like actual schools, right? Yes, like actual schools that would cover all of this. Because, you see, for example, I don't take in those kinds of kids into my higher self school. I don't take them in because I'm not a psychotherapist. Well, I understand that they need to connect with their higher self, or something like that, to engage in meditations as well. What is meditation after all? Meditation is relaxation. You relax, your mind steps aside a bit, and all those distortions that were in the deeper layers can manifest if the person is unstable. Exactly, if he is unstable. For a healthy person, any meditative practice leads to greater harmony, more happiness, tranquility, answers to questions about extrasensory perception, and so on. But for a sick person, it may not be beneficial. So, for example, I have a number of psychotherapists to whom I can refer this person. It's not really a question. But until he stabilizes, until he starts taking those medications and so on, I wouldn't be doing any meditations or any other techniques in their place. That is, first, patch up this wound, understand everything in general, what is happening to him, and only after that, go into esotericism. Because otherwise, with esotericism, they might just amplify those kinds of issues for themselves.
I think, that many people are generally afraid of esotericism, thinking that they might start getting involved with something. Yes. I think this is the main fear of a lot of people, that right now. Moreover, the fear can even be subconscious, which leads people to choose teachers who actually don't teach anything, but just pretend that we're doing some kind of dance with tambourines, while the person has been stuck for 10 years and no abilities are being revealed. And this subconscious fear shapes such a reality for him. And this fear comes up especially when I think that if I start engaging in true practices of self-discovery, revealing my energy, my higher self, and all my extrasensory abilities, I might go crazy.
Look, I can only speak here for the higher self. In terms of the higher self, how much time does it take through my school? In 12 years, about 3,000 people have gone through there. They were all healthy. Well, again, some of them had bipolar disorder. I can remember a few people specifically. because I realized it would be beneficial for them. And it really was beneficial for them. On the contrary, they got off the medications after that. But mostly these were healthy people, all of these 3,000 individuals. And well, listen, no one has gone crazy. That's 100% true because I'm in contact with all of them and absolutely no one has gone crazy. Because soft meditative practices, soft, deep, true, it is impossible to go crazy. If you don't already have a significant break, meaning a documented case of schizophrenia or a severe level of bipolar disorder.
I would probably like to explain to people how, from your perspective, this all works. Why does it happen that someone, I don't know, goes to Ayahuasca and then they start having these kinds of experiences that they can't get rid of later? Some people start engaging in certain practices, and their abilities begin to gradually unfold, and everything is fine, while for others, their abilities start to emerge in a clumsy way, and it ends up scaring them. Why does this happen on its own?
That's exactly why I keep saying, don't mess with all sorts of junk, on the contrary. I'm talking about all sorts of mushrooms and other things. Well, they can really unlock certain abilities. But from what I've seen, I've never used them myself. But I've seen many guys who have used them and how they described it. It's like trying to open a jar of pickles with an axe. So you take it like this. But overall, it's not that great of a pleasure. These are harsh methods. The psyche isn't ready. Any harsh methods, whether it's, for example, holotropic breathing. It's no coincidence that in holotropic breathing, when we breathe, we feel that we're breathing. We feel that we're breathing. We feel that we're breathing. Any harsh methods will always be months. For example, holotropic. It's not for nothing that it's in the cold. In holotropic breathing, there's always someone sitting next to you who guides you, just to make sure you don't get led off into some unclear direction. And I'll be honestly, I might get bombarded with all sorts of rotten things for saying this, but I support the fact that ayahuasca is officially banned in Russia because I've seen guys who use this method uncontrollably and I know what happens to them afterwards. Nothing good comes from many of them really, and nothing good comes from mushrooms. So yeah, I've always been for the gentle method. Gentle meditation, yeah, it takes a long time. Again, I had 6 months in school. Yeah, 6 months. And the first results are really quite obvious. Ideally, it's 6 months and then a few more months, up to a year, yeah. But at least, as they say, your mind won't go off the rails. It's gentle, it's step by step, it's very loving. I think Alina will confirm. You were in my course. In this regard, it's very much like...
But the results come earlier.
Yeah, earlier. You're being a bit modest. I'm speaking for those guys who are starting from scratch, like completely from scratch. You still had a small foundation or a big foundation? Right. For those who are starting completely from scratch, it takes about 5-6 months, roughly. And I think that's where the difference lies. That's where the difference lies.
Well, it depends on psychological health, right? As you said, if something is initially broken inside, then some practices aren't gentle, right?
Not gentle ones especially, yes.
Well, yes, I'm talking about them. The substances, it's like a lottery. So it can either reveal something or it can reveal what you got stuck in later, right?
You got stuck later, true. So it depends on...
And considering that almost all of us are broken right now, or rather, I would say everyone, it's just a question of...
Degrees of brokenness. Degrees, yes.
How someone has lived through their brokenness? Well, it's kind of like playing that lottery, I guess.
That's true. That's why I'm always completely against it. You know, when people come to me and ask, what do you think about ayahuasca? I say, you have a connection with your higher self. Do gentle meditation. Take your time. Practice for 6 months. And forget about ayahuasca for now.
Well, in the end, ask your higher self if you really need to go there.
And then really ask your higher self.
Maybe it is needed. It might be necessary for someone.
But I'll say this, I've never seen a higher self tell anyone that they need ayahuasca.
Interesting, right? Not once has the higher self said.
Not once, not.
Interesting. Although they say, it's also a choice of the spirit, even if there are some heavy experiences, it's a choice of the spirit.
Yes, not. Maybe, of course, I didn't ask the right people, but from what I've seen, not once. For those interested in a gentle path, who really want to start seeing the surrounding world a bit more extrasensory, who want to learn how to answer questions or explore certain topics in a softer, more loving way, and who won't lead you down the same old track. The link is below this video. The special group for the summer is already forming. As they say, please reserve your spot a little in advance, because it makes it easier for both you and me as the organizer of this school. And come, I'll be waiting for you.
Dear friends, I invite you all to my course with a personal vision, Return to the True Self. This course has been around for over 12 years. And recently we launched it in English with my complete personal vision in 6 modules, working with blocks, working with egregores, working with the ego, contacting the higher self. Answers to simple questions, answers to more complex questions, and then there's what we call the Great Journey. It's contact with space, contact with the planet, contact with God, contact with anything at your request through the higher self. Health, finances, relationships, purpose, past life. The course is available at any time. You can sign up for it using the link below this video. Come on over, I'll be waiting for you.